The Tattered Spectre by Lone Ranger. Ever since I was 6 years old, I've lived in eastern Virginia, in a town called Williamsburg. It's just up the road from the original Jamestown settlement, and smack dab in between the state capital, Richmond, and the largest naval base in the world. Norfolk Williamsburg is already a major hotspot of tourist activity, but it's helped by the fact that Williamsburg is one of the oldest towns in the state, possibly in the country. It has a lot of the original buildings and architecture still intact, even after hundreds of years. Banking on this, the town's tourist industry is centered around an area known as Colonial Williamsburg, filled with lots of 18th century buildings, and people walking around dressed as if the American Revolution had only been won yesterday. It's actually very interesting. There are plenty of fun mini-histories that go with the buildings, in addition to the area's overall historical value. Now, as with many old places, Williamsburg has its fair share of ghost stories. Some buildings are said to have had literal skeletons in their closets, while some are the sites of brutal deaths. And over the decades, people have reported seeing various phantoms and spirits haunt the area. I don't know if the encounter I had was with a ghost or an entity, or if it had anything to do with the fact that I live in an area known for being haunted. But a few years back, I had an experience that truly boggled my mind. My family used to take walks around the neighborhood. The main portion of it is just a giant loop, so it was very convenient for a short evening walk. I was probably about 14 years old, and one evening, my sister and I went with my mom for a walk around the loop. Only around a block and a half away from where we lived, I stopped in front of a neighbor's house and told my mom and sister to walk ahead of me. For the past several years, one of our cats, named Brutus, had been living in their yard because they kept leaving out treats and extra food for him, even though we asked him not to so he would come back. He was getting pretty old and his health was failing. We didn't see much of him at our house, but often we walked past theirs and he'd come out from their side yard and greet us with a friendly purring and meowing. I wanted to see if he'd come out. I watched my sister and mom walk away for a few moments, and then I turned back to look and see if Brutus had come out. I was shocked to see something hovering near the upper left corner of my neighbor's garage door. I've always had a hard time thinking of how to describe what it was. It was very, very bright, though the light seemed to be contained within itself, and it had lots of tendrils and ragged extensions billowing outward in slow motion. It looked almost like a shining orb of maybe hair, or even a torn and frayed dress, like the kind an old doll might have worn. But whatever it was tattered and bright. I stepped closer a few times, and accordingly it got larger in my perspective, and I saw it begin to slowly move in an upward direction, toward the right. And there was still a lot of light out, so it wasn't as if the darkness was playing tricks on my vision, and I must have averted my gaze to look at my family farther down the street at least half a dozen times. Yet every time I looked back, that tattered orb was still hovering and moving in the same direction. For whatever reason, I didn't call out to my family, and I started to walk closer to the object. Something in the back of my mind told me, no, just leave it alone. After a solid minute, I decided to keep walking in order to catch up with my mom and sister. I walked slowly, looking back every few seconds to see if the orb was still there. Sure enough, it never disappeared, and I kept looking back until we finally rounded a corner and I lost sight of the house. Since then, I've walked down that same street many times, in every season and at every time of day, but never once have I seen that orb, or anything remotely similar to it. It wasn't a particularly significant, frightening, or exciting experience, I know, but it definitely left me puzzled. Not entirely sure what I'd seen, or if it had any importance in any way. More for my personal curiosity than anything else. If anyone has had a similar experience or seen a similar object, I'd be very interested to hear your story and see if it can shed any light onto mine.
Blink by Ham Slam. I am tired of keeping quiet and having it rack my brain trying to figure out what the fuck happened. A bit of history first, though. I was always an odd child, even as a baby, and I guess now you could say I've grown into an odd adult. I have had countless experiences and stories that have just become my everyday. But there is one thing that constantly sits in the back of my mind, and I have exhausted every logical explanation I can think of or think of researching. The earliest I can remember of this strange thing happening is probably at 4 years old. Although, whenever I've questioned my family about it, they say that they can remember it happening at around 6 months old. I was always one of those kids that was curious about everything and got into anything I'd be told not to. I would always appear or be found in random places that I either clearly could not have gotten into or places where I wasn't left. But at 4 years old, I remembered that I would blink, feel like my body weighed nothing, like my mind and senses had been turned off, and then appear in some random place not too far away. I thought that everyone could do the same thing and thought nothing of it until I steadily got older. Many times I would blink and suddenly be on top of a counter or in a cupboard. I'd get scared and start crying. Then I'd be reprimanded when I couldn't explain how I was just in the other room or in the living room and now suddenly I was somewhere else. I thought I would be in trouble for doing it without any knowledge or control. My parents were very disturbed because when they would find me in these high places, there would be nothing around me to have climbed on to get to where I was. As I got older, I realized the problem was because they thought I had did it on purpose, that I had deliberately disobeyed them, not that I was randomly appearing in rooms, and I learned that no one else would appear in rooms like I did. I remember being so afraid because it would happen randomly. One moment I would be reading in my room, then I would suddenly be on top of the dining room table. Doctors had reassured my parents that all it was an adventurous spirit and lack of parental supervision. But at 8 years old, it began to happen less often. Then it eventually stopped altogether. I thought about this for many years and had eventually settled on the conclusion that I just must have blacked out from time to time. And due to the lack of supervision, I was able to somehow get into places and find ways that others just couldn't think of. I went through my preteen and teen years with this only happening a handful of times. Usually it would happen when I was walking. I would somehow travel 3 to 5 blocks without the time changing, when it should have taken about 15 minutes. During those years, I saw doctors, and they always asked if I was taking any drugs. My answer was no. I was always sober and had never done or tried drugs when it happened. I began researching more and started thinking that perhaps I just simply blacked out due to some theory that a guy proposed, which pretty much says that the only reason why we or anything in the universe exists because it is a thought in what someone else or ourselves perceive as reality. For example, that table is only there because you think it is there, that you will it into existence subconsciously. But if it subconsciously doesn't register, then it disappears or doesn't exist. You think, therefore you are. The name escapes me at the moment. I'm sorry. So it doesn't happen any longer for a while, and I just chalk it up to my mind skipping out. When I was 19, I moved across the country, and my boyfriend and I lived with his parents. My boyfriend's younger brother had a habit of sneaking out at night and was going through the general rebellious stage. He had been arrested a few times for doing dumb shit, like graffiti, vandalism, trespassing, stuff like that. So we came to an agreement that we would go out with him at night and pretty much babysit him to make sure he didn't get in any trouble. Our third night of this, and he continuously made fun of me for being a wet blanket, to put it nicely. As we're leaving the house via the back kitchen door, him and my boyfriend jump from the small steps and land gracefully on the patio. Due to bad depth perception, I always took the stairs when it was night. My boyfriend jumped first and went to the front of the house to make sure the area was clear and no one would see us. Then, his brother jumped and stayed behind to get on me once again about using the stairs. The thing about the steps was that there was a small standing area, about half a foot long and 1 foot wide, and then a 2-foot stop directly in front of you, stairs to your right, and a small hole that led to the basement that was safely covered by a window about 3 feet down. I'm only 5 feet tall, so either of those falls would have been trouble for me if I fell. But due to getting tired of the teasing, I decided to jump in to shut him up. Mature, right? Well, due to my short legs and bad depth perception, I jumped too far left and saw myself heading toward the hole to the basement. I let out a half scream. Everything went black and I felt the weightlessness come again, like I had no body. I felt my body again as I hit something hard. It was the trunk of a tree. My arms were splayed out over the exposed roots. My head and back were laying against the trunk, a good 8 to 10 feet from where I had jumped, and all I could hear were my boyfriend and his brother freaking out. They kept yelling, "What the fuck?" While he was pacing in a small circle, my boyfriend asked him what had happened, and all his brother kept saying was, "How the fuck did she do that?" and "What the hell just happened? That can't happen." My boyfriend asked me what happened, and I just shrugged my shoulders. I honestly couldn't give him an answer. I explained what I remembered, and I could only follow up with, "I think I jumped further than I thought." My brother didn't believe that I could jump that far. After all, I'm not exactly built for jumping. The thing is, I didn't even believe what I had said either. We asked his brother what he had seen, and he just kept saying, "That's not possible." We eventually got him back inside, but the whole time his eyes were wide and he refused to let me go near him. After a few hours, we questioned him again. According to him, he saw that when I was about to jump, I was too far to the left, so he just couldn't miss seeing me beef it. And when I jumped, I did more of a final step off of the plank rather than a jump. But when my foot was about to hit the beginning of the hole, I had let out a scream, then disappeared, and the scream had stopped. That's all we could get out of him because he started to freak out again. After that, we tried talking to him about it once more, but he'd always start freaking out when we mentioned it, so we eventually just stopped bringing it up. It's been almost 7 years, and he still refuses to talk about it. I've noticed it happening again every so often, but it honestly worries me. Usually it will happen when I'm walking to work. What is supposed to be a 6-mile walk in 2 hours will suddenly be 1 hour, or I'll blink, and I'm randomly 3 miles further than I'm supposed to be with no time having gone by. I'm worried that one day it might happen at work, or in front of a crowd that notices, or that I might end up in a wall or a different dimension or something weird like that one day. So that's my terrifying experience. I'm 26 and have no clue what this is, what might happen to me, or what to do about it. Maybe it's a slip in time. Maybe it's a glitch in the Matrix. Or perhaps some spirit has attached itself to me just for the sake of torment. Ghosts on My Street by Wyatt H. I've had many experiences with the paranormal, especially in my own home. It all started when my dad was young. He lived in a very haunted house that supposedly had demons. He says that whenever he was about 4, a demon tried to grab him through a vent, and then when he had me, my nursery was in what is now the back room, and up until I was 2, somewhat paranormal things had happened. At 3 every morning, the witching hour, the TV in that room would go to static, and it would be on full blast. Every time it happened, my dad went to go turn it off, but one time it turned off itself. I would always cry that a monster was eating my bed or trying to eat me. That back room is always very cold, and even now I refuse to go in there alone, and my grandpa, who lives next door, has experiences himself. At night, while he's asleep, he feels something sit on the bed beside him. Often, we see shadow figures cross the hall from his room to the spare room, and the spare room there is always cold. My uncle says when he slept in there, it sometimes felt like someone was sitting on his chest. Our neighbors also have had experiences. One day I found out that a trailer across the street once caught fire. Apparently someone died. I can't help but shake the feeling that something greater, or worse, is at work here.
Ghost in the School by Anonymous. I was about 12 years old and going to school in London. And this happened about 3 years ago. Me and my friends were all into paranormal things and liked scaring each other a lot. Some of them would talk about any paranormal experiences they had, but I hadn't experienced anything paranormal at the time. My friends also used to say that if you would say the word ghost on the stairs in front of 2 big metal doors in the hallway, then the doors would swing open and something would chase you. I completely thought it was a joke, as nobody said they saw it happen to them, and it sounded kinda stupid. However, when my teacher asked me to go get something, I thought I would try my luck for the hell of it. So, since I had to go past the stairs, I said, "Ghost." I was all alone, and I felt pretty nervous, but I waited for something to happen. Just as I was about to start walking again, I saw a faint, dark figure through the window of the door. Although it was very hard to see, I knew it wasn't human. The door then slammed open, and I saw a huge hollow figure standing there. Thinking about it now, it was only about 10 meters away from me. It had very long legs and what looked like a stretched face. As soon as I could get a proper look at what it was gone. I told many of my friends, and a couple of them did believe me. I told the people who didn't believe me to go try it for themselves. Every other time they did do it, they said that nothing happened. All I know is that every time I was alone, I would avoid those stairs.
The Coin, submitted by John. During the time of this story, we lived in a smaller city just south of Las Vegas called Henderson. We lived tucked inside a very quiet and boring suburban neighborhood that never really had a lot of action. It was me, my mother, and my dad living in the house, and up to 2011, my grandmother on my mom's side also lived with us, as she needed to live with us because she had extreme emphysema and was on oxygen 24/7. Growing up, I was always at odds with her. We didn't really like each other, and she died in 2011. Fast forward maybe a year, I'm not entirely sure as this was at least several years ago from now while I'm typing this story. When my grandmother died, my mom had her cremated, and her ashes were kept at the crematorium, I guess, because after cremation, my mom didn't come home with the ash urn until a few days after it happened. But she brought it home one night and put the urn up on a cabinet in my grandma's old room, which still had all her stuff in it, by the way. My grandmother's bedroom is the first floor bedroom with a bathroom attached. It stretches into the kitchen, so the bedroom door is right by the stairway. A series of strange shit happened afterwards. The same night we brought her home, we were all in the upstairs bedroom. Me and my mother heard a loud thud downstairs, so we go downstairs and didn't even bother to look in my grandma's room because we were busy looking in the living room and dining room. Finding nothing, we forgot about it and turned to go back upstairs. Then we realized that the light was on in our grandma's room. The door was still shut. Immediately, we were freaked out. As my mom opened the door, we saw her old lamp thrown across the recliner chair next to the dresser the lamp usually resided on. We looked at each other, and I felt my face turn a pale white. We freaked out. After we calmed down, we tried to rationalize, but knew we really couldn't, because no animal could have gotten in. The door was shut all day. This was very strange, and it's not even the worst thing that happened in this story. Maybe a few weeks later, one night, I'm having a friend spend the night. We go to a movie, stay up till around midnight, then go to my room upstairs with my grandma's room right under mine. We sit there for a while, just talking, and eventually the topic of my grandma comes up. So of course, I tell him about me and my mom's story. We just agreed it was very weird and eventually went to bed. Now, right after my grandma died, I was looking for spare money she may have had. I found this cool, old 1898 silver dollar. I took it and had it on my nightstand and just kept it there. After 10 minutes, I'm finally drifting off to sleep, when I was suddenly shot awake when I heard something metallic fly across the room and smack into my glass table. It woke and startled the shit out of both of us. We quickly went into rational and calm mode because we figured something simply fell. I got up and hit the lights. We looked around and saw nothing around the table. I turned and realized the silver dollar was gone. This gives me a very eerie feeling, and we start tearing the room apart, flipping the couch and the bed, the table. We checked the closet, etc., but nothing. So we searched the room with a fine-toothed comb, and still we found nothing. We checked our pockets to make sure. Then a light bulb goes off in our heads. Our shoes were on the ground. We just kicked them aside to search everywhere else. So we check our shoes. Find nothing though. But then I decided to lift the sole out of the shoe, and when I saw the coin there, my heart sank. We immediately ran out of the house like madmen. After a few weeks, the ashes were taken and emptied into the air. When the urn was gone, all this paranormal activity stopped, and nothing like it has happened before or since. I've tried to debunk this event as a freak accident, but the fact is that the coin was obviously thrown with force, and of all places it could have landed, it landed underneath the sole of my brand new shoe. This isn't a weak, worn-out sole that something could fall into by accident. If something was in the shoe, it was downright enough to where I struggled to pull it out. I don't see a real explanation for this. Something paranormal was going on.
What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys for watching to the end, especially if you made it this far. I'd also like to give a special thanks to my collaborator this episode, Darkness Prevails. We thought it would be fun, since The Conjuring is coming out soon, to do a few little ghost-type stories like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did happen to enjoy it, please feel free to leave a comment below, and maybe leave a like and share if you feel so inclined. If you have any personal stories you'd like to send in, or any stories you'd like me to read, there will be links to my social media in the description below. This includes my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter. Go ahead and send me a message on there, and I'll try to include your story in a video as soon as possible. You can also go ahead and send me a message if you just want to chat. I am up for that too. If you do decide to send in a story for me to read, please feel free to include in the tagline what the story is about and how you'd like to be credited if the story is read in the video. If you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.